Getting your law degree. Everything you need to understand to go from high school all the way to a practicing attorney.
You have kids, they grow up, and before you know it, it's time to plan for college.
Where do you start?
How much is it going to cost?
Will you qualify for financial aid?
Should you be looking into scholarships?
When will you be able to retire?
What about student loans?
The list of questions is never ending. The good news is, all the answers are right here. Welcome to the Taming the High Cost of College podcast. Here is your host, certified financial planner, Brad Baldridge.
Hello and welcome to Taming the High Cost of College. I'm your host, Brad Baldridge. Today we have a great interview with Sydney Montgomery. She's a lawyer and she also specializes in helping students become lawyers. She understands the process that you need to go through in order to get your law degree and pass the bar. She also understands the undergrad process as far as getting accepted to a law school. There's a lot of great information in this program. If you have a student that's considering attorney or lawyer as their education goal, this is a lot of great information. It'll help both parents and students understand what it really takes to get all the way to a lawyer. You know, it's been my experience that most students don't really understand the process, especially if they're still in high school. And of course, there's many steps. And if you're not an attorney yourself, it can be challenging to understand the whole process. So go ahead and plug in and listen. This is a great episode. As always, show notes are available at our website at tamingthehighcostofcollege.com. That's all for now. Let's jump into the interview. Today, I'm talking with Sydney Montgomery. She's the CEO of S. Montgomery Admissions Consulting. Welcome, Sydney.
Thank you, Brad. Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Right. So, and I'm really excited to talk to you because you've got some expertise that I'm looking forward to learning more about. So let's talk a little bit about that. One of the things that you work around or work in is not just undergrad admissions, but also law school admissions. And can you tell us a little bit more about how you got involved in these various admissions consulting roles and, kind of a little bit of your history?
Absolutely. So I was the first student from my high school to go to Princeton. And I have always kind of had a background in educational organizations and tutoring and writing. Writing is a very large part of what I believe spurs upward mobility. And when I got into Princeton, I learned that there were so many misconceptions about the admissions process and about affordability, especially. Princeton was the most affordable school that I got into. They were very generous with their financial aid, and people, always said, oh, you won't be able to afford to go. But I couldn't afford to go anywhere else, right? And so I started giving back to my local church, to my school, to dance studios in the area. I had phenomenal pre-law advising at Princeton, but unfortunately, the Princeton pre-law advisor left my first year of law school. And there were a number of first-gen and Black and brown students who didn't have any guidance. Even, if you go to a top school, it doesn't necessarily mean you have that cultural, institutional capital and knowledge to advance yourself to the next stage. So I ended up helping students through the law school process, realized the privilege that I was in and the circumstances that I had and how it kind of changed my life and my ability to create generational wealth. I clicked for a judge, I practiced family law, but ultimately decided to pivot to educational consulting. And we really do focus on law school admissions. We help all kinds of students, but especially non-traditional students, first-gen and minority students. But, we have a ton of just students that are in college as well, really focusing on helping make sure they make a good investment, helping make sure that they are choosing a school that is going to help them thrive in their career and their future, but also that they are not creating a source of debt for themselves. Because unfortunately, while we hear that lawyers make a ton of money, there are a lot of people who are in a worse financial position because they went to law school. And so it is my job to make sure that not only are you happy, you're going to become a great lawyer, you're going to impact your community, you're going to tell your story authentically through your essays, but you're going to be in a great financial position when you're done.
Right. Absolutely. I think the rules change when you go from undergrad to graduate school. And a lot of our listeners are just starting to maybe understand the undergrad rules. And then to throw law school on top is a big ask in some cases. So let's kind of start at the beginning then. So I understand the very basics of I want to be a lawyer. The basic steps, right? You get accepted to a undergrad, you do well, you get accepted to a law school, you do well, and then you go pass a bar, which I'm not exactly sure what that means. But let's talk about each step and drill into it a little bit, because I think for a lot of students out there that say, I want to be a lawyer when I grow up, that, like, first of all, they're not real sure what that means potentially, because their exposure to law is Law and Order on TV or whatever it might be. And they think that they're going to go get involved in the dramatic lawyering in some important case and spend their life arguing with judges and counsel and that kind of stuff. Whereas, like a lot of lawyers do other things. So why don't we start there? So you start with undergrad and do well. What does do well mean in undergrad? Does it matter what college you pick? How do you, quote unquote, do well?
Yeah, no, I love that question because people ask all of the time, like, oh my God, what do I need to major in to go to law school? Or what school do I need to go to a great law school? It is not like medical school in the sense where, pre-med means something and it's important. While many schools do have pre-law programs, it's not required. I mean, you have to know how to write and to read, and you can study and do whatever you want, really, as long as you have good reading and writing skills. I always say one of my close classmates in law school, who I love dearly, she danced for Britney Spears and Beyonce before she came to law school. She's fantastic as a human, but she wanted to study entertainment law, right? She had a very, very successful dance career for 18 years and then came to law school. You can do a number of things and go to law school because there are so many different areas of law and so many different expertise that will inform that. So I tell students, and we work with college, undergraduate applicants and law school applicants, go to school that's going to make you happy, that's going to be a good fit, right? You probably have heard other people say, the fit in school is really important. And it is, because your GPA is very important. You want to go to the school where you're going to be able to form relationships with professors who are going to write those top letters of recommendation for you. You want to go to a school where you're going to be able to have a 3.5, 3.7, 3.9 GPA, and where you're going to be passionate and interested. So, most lawyers actually aren't trial lawyers or litigators. It's not like, everyone's out here in courtrooms. It's a very small percentage of lawyers that are actually trial attorneys. There are a lot of different areas of law. And so the first thing I always tell kids, or even adults, if they're thinking about going to law school, is have a couple conversations with some lawyers. Like, that's probably step one. Make sure it sounds like you actually like the type of work that they're doing. And then, really just focus on being a great college student. You figure out if you want to major in molecular biology, major in molecular biology. That's fine, right? Maybe you want to work on, scientific patents for law school. That's pretty cool. That background would be really helpful. I would be useless. I'm allergic to science. I can't go into that kind of law. I would not understand anything anyone brought me ever. So, just go to college, choose a good fit school, choose whatever major is going to excite you. Because if you're in a school environment that you love and you're studying something you're passionate about, you're going to get better grades. And that high GPA is really important for a law school. You want to go to a school where you're going to succeed.
Right. Now, does it matter if I, as far as with the undergrad school, if I go to my, say, flagship state school, University of Illinois, University of Wisconsin, University of Virginia, or do I need to go to Yale in order to get into Harvard? What are the kind of that pecking order? Is that as critical as some people think, or?
No, it's really not. I mean, I know I'm biased because I went to Princeton for undergrad, but at Harvard, there is a wide variety of schools. I mean, honestly, I feel like most students at Harvard Law did not come from an Ivy League. I feel like most students, most of my classmates, came from state schools or smaller liberal arts colleges or women's colleges. And like I said, people tend to take more time off with law school. So you will see some people took 1 or 2 years off. Some people took 20 years off before they went to law school. And I think that reasoning, there's a lot of priority put on work experience. If you're applying straight from college, it's okay, but you want to make sure you have good internship experience. But it's the experiences themselves that are more important than necessarily the name of where you went. Now, yes, if you were able to get a 4.0 at Yale versus a 4.0 at, your Sunnyside University Safety School, and you were able to get those top letters of recommendation from Yale, then, I mean, yeah, probably Harvard and Yale would say, wow, she can really handle that high academic rigor. But I think a lot of schools would rather that 4.0 from Sunnyside State University than that 2.9 from Yale because you went to Yale and it was really hard and you didn't thrive, right? Because at that point, the Yale name is not helping you so much because that 2.9 is really hurting you.
Right. Yeah. So grades matter. Okay. So then the next step is you need to get accepted to and go to law school. So how long is law school? And tell us more about that as far as.
Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to add one other thing in that whole like Yale Sunnyside University thing. If you have to pay full sticker for Yale and your family is going to take out $100,000, $200,000 in debt for undergrad, that's like not a great idea if you're then going to go to law school because you're most likely going to have loans. So it's probably better to try to minimize your undergrad debt if you know you're going to try to go to law school. But if we're talking about, okay, so I did great. What are those next steps? Your law school application composes of your GPA, which we've discussed, your letters of recommendation from your professors, your LSAT or GRE score. So it's the law school admission tests or the GREs, the general grad school exam. Most law schools still prefer the LSAT, although more and more schools are accepting both exams. You're going to want to study for that, usually probably the summer before your senior year. Some students need as much as 6, 9, or 12 months to study for the LSAT exam. It's unlike any other exam you've ever taken. It's not knowledge-based. It's really like you have to learn how to take this test. And so I usually say students in their junior or senior year of college, it would be great to take a diagnostic, sign up for a test prep program. You're going to need to give yourself at least 6 months, really. And then you're going to have essays. You're going to have your personal statement. You might have a diversity statement. You might have some optional supplemental essays. Only a handful of schools interview. You'll have your resume. You can have a 2-page resume. You really want to make sure that you're showcasing the impact that you've done, the internships, the experiences. That's really important for law school. And it should relate ideally to what kind of law you want to practice. And then, any addenda or explanation statements that you might need. That's your law school application process. And so you want to make a plan for your LSAT, your LSAT exam. You want to get good test prep for that. And then you want to make a plan for your essays. Your essays are actually really important. Some people will say, oh, your essays don't matter. It's only your GPA and your LSAT score. That's not true. We work with a number of students that have lower LSAT scores or GPAs, especially if you're a non-traditional student, if you're going back to law school, like you might not have done super well in undergrad, but now you're a different person. You've grown and you've matured. So your essays are really important to help tell your narrative.
Right. So when you're shopping for law school, so to speak, are there substantial differences between programs as far as, I don't know how long law school is as an example. Are they all just a 2 or 3 year program, or is there differences from how one works to the other?
Most law schools are 3 years if they're full-time programs. A lot of part-time programs are 4 years. If you're coming abroad from another country, let's say you're a lawyer in another country, you can get a 1-year LLM, which is a Master of Laws, which will allow you to practice in the US. Or sometimes you can get an accelerated 2-year JD for international attorneys if you want a full JD, but you're already an attorney foreign trained. Most people listening, your kids are going to get a 3-year law degree. In terms of programs, the top maybe 30 schools, as according to like U.S. News and World Report, those would be national law schools. What that means is that you can go to that school and you can go practice law anywhere you want. Employers will come from around the country to job fairs. It's very easy. Most students that go to Harvard, they don't stay in Massachusetts. But then most law schools, right, the 163 other law schools are usually regional law schools because you're taking a bar exam. Granted, they have the uniform bar exam now, so it gives you more flexibility. And that bar exam is like a test. It's like the test to practice. You can graduate from law school and not pass the bar, and then you can never practice, and that's not great. So you want to make sure, one of those things that you're shopping around is you want to look at the law school's bar passage rates. You don't want to go to a law school that only has a 30% bar passage rate because then you're never going to be able to practice law and you're just going to be stuck with these loans. But most law schools are regional law schools, and that doesn't mean that they're worse, right? They could have incredible connections and employer relations just in that state or in that area. and you want to think about, well, where do I want to practice law? What are some geographic areas that I would be okay living in? Even if you are putting national schools on your list, you always want a couple of regional schools just in case they could give good scholarship money. And then if you're really interested in a certain area, if you're interested in domestic violence or animal rights, you want to see if they have like a clinic or a journal. What are the clubs and organizations that they have at that law school that really speak to your ability to get experience during law school, which will help you get a job, and also their ability to help you network to get a job.
Right. Okay. So typical is a 3-year degree. So you do the 3 years, and then you just mentioned the bar, which I guess is the last step. So what is the bar exam? And
Yeah.
I think it's state by state, but can you expound on that a little?
Right. Yeah. So the bar exam, I'm not a huge fan of. I mean, I did pass the bar, but I think that as a concept, it doesn't make sense really. But basically, it is a 2 or a 3-day exam, depending on what state you're in. California has the hardest bar. It's 3 days. Some states have adopted the uniform bar exam, which means you take one exam, and depending on your score, you can practice in certain states. But traditionally, it's been a state-by-state exam. You usually study for about 3 months, 2 to 3 months after you graduate law school. So a lot of students will take either a bar loan, as it's called, so that they can live, or if they have, parents who can help them, support them for those 3 months. You will study for the bar, like maybe usually May through July. You'll take the bar exam in July. You'll usually start your job in August, September, pending bar results, and you'll get your results in November. And then it's kind of up to your employer what happens if you don't pass the bar. It can go either way. A lot of employers will extend you grace to take it again in February, and then if you don't pass the bar again, sometimes you will not have a job anymore. But there's a multi-state exam, which is the multiple choice portion of it. And it covers all of the classes that you take in your first year of law school. Everyone in law school takes the same classes your first year. So it's torts, it's contracts, it's constitutional law, it's, maybe some legislation and regulation, it's civil procedure, all of those kind of fundamental classes. And then depending on the state, there may be some additional, like Maryland had commercial papers and securities. Maryland had family law. There might be a couple of different other subjects that are state by state. So there's the multiple choice portion, which everyone takes. And then there are these written responses, a professional type exam, so essay answers, and then maybe even like a practical kind of write a memo based on this information. It's long. It's like 8 hours. It's a very, it's 2 to 3 days. It's grueling, but it's necessary to then be a barred licensed attorney.
Right. So you mentioned, you mind sharing what state you did your bar exam in?
Yeah. I took the bar in Maryland. Okay. I knew I was going to come back home to Maryland, so I'm a Maryland barred attorney. Maryland didn't have the uniform bar exam the year that I took it. They now do. So unfortunately, I'm only barred in Maryland. Although if I wanted to practice law in a different state after a certain number of years, and I think I'm at this point, I could take an attorney's exam at another state if I wanted to practice law in a different state. But I am only barred in the state of Maryland, which means I can't practice law in DC. I can't practice law in Virginia. I can only practice law in Maryland.
Okay. So, in essence, you can't, work in other states, so to speak. Do lawyers that do multi-state thing? Is there lawyers that might say, well, I need to be...
Yeah, there are
12 states, so they go through this process 12 times, or what?
No, that's not likely. I mean, with the uniform bar exam, like I said, it did make it a little easier because you have more states. If you get a high enough score, there are more states that you can kind of wade into. There are some attorneys that are multi-barred. When I was at my family law practice, we were kind of on the border between Maryland and DC. So a lot of lawyers in our group were also barred in DC. That's pretty common, or maybe also barred in Virginia because I'm in the DC, Maryland, Virginia area. You will often see sometimes a lawyer might be barred in New York and California. The bar exam is given at the same time. So before the uniform bar exam, it's like impossible, right? You can't take Maryland and California at the same time because they're the same days, right? So you would have to take Maryland maybe in July and then take California in February or something like that. a lot of employers will also pay for your bar prep, which is helpful. Like I said, if you're barred in one state, getting barred in a second state is easier than just the first time you get barred, because depending on your level and your experience, you can take an attorney's exam, which is a much shorter exam just on the new state. And you don't have to go through all of the, that first section again. But no, most firms just have people who are barred in multiple states. But they don't necessarily, the one lawyer is not usually barred in like 10 or 12 states. That would be an exorbitant amount of money and time.
Right. All right. So then once you pass the bar in a state, then you can practice in that state, So what happens in, like for corporations that have locations across the country or whatever, and they're trying to deal with issues that pop up all over the place? How does the world deal with, let's say, a retail store that has to deal with slip and fall in all 50 states because they're a Walmart and they have locations in all 50 states? Do they have lawyers or,
So there are some things that you need to be barred on, like to do research and to write a memo. Like I don't necessarily need to be barred, right? But to represent you in court, if you're being sued, like Walmart would never get sued in all 50 states. So if someone like had a slip and fall case, they would, I usually probably, Walmart would probably have some venue preferences, but it would go to one state. So most of the big, like the top law firms, we talk about lawyers make a ton of money at those top law firms where they're making over $200,000. Those firms have locations in every major city and even some non-major cities. They're everywhere, right? They're internationally. So if you're working with the, Skadden office in New York, I don't actually know. I think they have a DC office, and something happened in DC, then someone from DC would pick it up, right? So they just employ enough people in enough states where if they have a big client that has multi-state issues, someone will be able to serve you.
Okay, that's how it works. So a lot of the bigger firms have multiple locations or probably relationships in the states that they don't necessarily have locations and whatever. So that leads you to the concept, I guess, of the national law firm versus the regional law firm. That's part of it. Okay. All right. So a lot of parents out there, I deal a lot with families in the kind of the undergrad, the sophomore, junior, seniors in high school that say, I'd like to be a lawyer someday.
Right.
They're trying to figure out, well, what do I do in undergrad in order to make law school work? And you mentioned any major will work and that type of thing. Is there any sort of prerequisites or anything? I know in like medical school, you got to take a physics sometimes, and you got to take a certain amount of lab sciences and biology. You can be a dance major, but you still have to have some lab sciences and that type of stuff. Is there something similar in law where you have to have a certain course schedule?
Not really.
Certain classes?
No, not really. I mean, they will want to see that you can write. I mean, obviously you'll be writing your application, but research and writing and critical thinking and analytical thinking, those are what law schools really prioritize. So while there is no prerequisites, I would say that, sometimes students ask me, well, I have an option to do a thesis in my junior or senior year, but like, is that really worth it? And I would say like, yeah, for law school it is, because it shows that you can do a substantial amount of research and write a high quality academic paper. If you're a dance major or a science major, like that's fine. Maybe at least just one literature class or one like class where you had to do research or write, even if it's research on dance, like a dance research seminar and you've produced a 20-page paper on the history of dance or something, like that would suffice. But something in your transcript has to have reading or writing or research in order for them to feel super confident with that GPA, right? If you have a 4.0, but it's literally all in movement. And I was a dancer, right? So if you go to a conservatory and you're doing ballet and jazz and whatever and top and you have a 4.0, but at no point have you done any writing or research, that 4.0 is basically worthless.
Right. Okay. So you want to do some academic version of things. So then is there colleges that offer more support or help, or, would I pick a particular undergrad school because of their quote unquote pre-law?
I don't think it should be the driving. Yeah, I don't think it should be the driving factor in your undergraduate college search. There are some schools, like for example, we have a partnership with Dillard University. It's an HBCU, a historically Black college and university in Louisiana. And if you were a first gen underrepresented student in that area that really wanted to go to law school, Dillard would actually be a really good choice because they have grants for things like LSAT tutors for their students and admissions help for their essays, right? So the school is providing a lot of in-kind resources that maybe you wouldn't be able to, maybe you don't have the family background or the circumstances where you can pay for test prep. But if your school is going to offer it, that would be really helpful for you. So I would say that there are sometimes if you're a first gen or minority student, or just even an under-resourced student, regardless of background, where a strong pre-law program that provides some of those supports, that prep that you don't have to pay for, that could be helpful. But if you are, and test prep usually runs you, I would say somewhere between $1,000 and $2,000, just so that listeners kind of understand what I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
So if like the thought of at some point I'm going to have to spend up to $2,000, and the applications are expensive too, right? So if you're like, man, I really don't know how I'm going to afford to apply to law school, it's like $2,000-$3,000 the whole application process. I don't know how I'm going to do that. Maybe you do want to look at some schools that are going to cut down on that cost for you because they're providing it to their students. But if you're listening and you're like, you know what, 4 or 5 years from now, Johnny wants to be a lawyer. It's going to be $3,000 the process. Maybe we're going to pay for admissions consulting. That's another couple thousand. We got that. Like, then I would not prioritize the pre-law support as much because you will be able to do it on your own. I think that there are some fantastic pre-law advisors, but also pre-law advisors change. And I think that's kind of my caution with choosing a school for their pre-law program, because at Princeton, I loved my pre-law advisor. Ryan Zapsky was amazing. Then there were a couple of years where there was no pre-law advisor, right? So, and that, like, it goes like that. They just had another pre-law advisor who was amazing, but then she went on maternity leave, right? So it just really depends. And I can't tell you 5 years from now what the pre-law is going to look like at Princeton. Like, yes, does Princeton have great pre-law? Sometimes when they have a great pre-law advisor.
Right, exactly. So at least at Princeton, it sounds like it was a one-person office. Essentially,
most schools have a one pre-law advisor. It would be housed within career services. Now, some schools do have maybe a pre-law director and a pre-law advisor or a pre-law department. So that could be helpful, but at the majority of schools, it is one person. Some schools don't have any pre-law advisors. Right. And that can be really hard because they are supposed to help you figure out your applications and that stuff. The other reason why I try to tell parents not to prioritize that too much is that most students take time off. Most students work between undergrad and law school. And so, your pre-law advisor at your undergrad is not necessarily going to be that helpful to you after you've graduated or a couple of years down the line, So it's not always the thing that I would hinge that decision on.
Right. But I'm just trying to figure out if there's things we should be looking for or not. So what about...
I would ask if you're going to, if they have a pre-law department, I would ask, where have your students gotten in? That's a great question, right? Where are your students going to law school? How many of your students actually get into law school? Or how many students start pre-law and actually apply to law school, I think is also a really good question, because there are a lot of students that come in pre-law and then for whatever reason, they don't do it. Now, there are some schools that have 3+3 programs, which would be 3 years of, you could get your undergrad and your law school degree in 6 years. And they would sometimes waive that if you you would go to the same school for undergrad and law school. And if that's a law school that you would want to go to, that might be, also a good option. But sometimes it's too premature to make that decision because you could end up with more choices, right? Like, Harvard doesn't have a 3+3 program. So maybe you want to apply to Harvard. Who knows?
Right.
But I would say, a strong writing center is probably going to be the other thing to look at, because those are going to be the people that will help you with your essays as an undergrad. So you want to make sure that they have strong writing center support.
Okay. So then again, pre-law is not really a major per se. You're going to pick an actual major and then but you are potentially declaring yourself in pre-law in some way to get involved in things at that college?
It depends on the school.
Okay. So Right. So I guess that's something that maybe you can compare a little bit as parents and students that are just getting involved in their
Yeah,
undergrad search.
they should have more than just like you've said your pre-law, because like that doesn't mean anything. Like if you're looking at pre-law programs at colleges, like ask them, like, do you provide tutoring? Do you provide essay support? Do you provide application sessions? Like what do I get besides just saying that my kid is pre-law? If it's just like, oh, we have a mock trial program and all of our students want to go to law school, then like that's basically nothing. But if
Mhm.
it's like, yes, like your junior year, we set you up with these tutoring sessions and you meet every month with the pre-law advisor to help pick your law schools, and we have all these information sessions. I think that was probably the most helpful thing about Princeton is that so many law schools came to Princeton, like to do info sessions. I didn't have to go places. Like the admissions officers came to me. And, I loved that. They were usually very small. I could meet the admissions. I could talk to them. I could ask them questions. Forming relationships with admissions is really important. So I would say like that was really, really helpful. So ask, like, do schools come and like, visit and do info sessions here? What support do you have for alumni is also a really good question as well, because not all schools give continuing support to alumni. But those
Mhm.
are the things that would make a strong pre-law program. If they're giving support to alumni, if law schools are coming to visit and interact with your students, if there's any kind of tutoring, or how much help do they do on the application essays and meetings, and how do they help you pick law schools? Like what is the actual support they're giving you?
Right. Okay. So if I reached out to a law school, say in my region or whatever, that I think might be a good target, would they share with me where they send their reps and that kind of stuff? Kind of like where they tend to recruit? Obviously some law schools went and decided to actually go to Yale and recruit. They probably don't go to every college in the nation. They have the top 10 or 20 or 50 or 100, or I don't know. Can you give us a little insight into that?
Yeah. So I think it's probably easier for you to ask the colleges what schools come than to ask the law schools, especially with COVID. That answer is probably a little bit more in flux. They may say, they may not say, but I think it's probably a better question directed to the colleges. Like what schools do you have relationships with that come and talk, versus asking the law schools themselves.
Right. Now, what about like information sessions? Do law schools do information sessions like they do in undergrad where,
Yes, they do.
a law school says, well, I'm going to be in the Chicago area. They might do something on campus at two colleges in the area, but then they also say, but we also have an open session for anybody in the greater Chicago area that wants to talk to us. We're available.
Law schools will have, there's a centralized place. It's called, so if you go on the Law School Admission Council, LSAC, that is kind of your first stop, because the LSAC will have law school forums. So they're like college fairs, but for law schools. There'll be digital ones and there'll be in-person ones based on area. Again, I mentioned that most students do not go straight from undergrad to law school. So these forums help capture working professionals, right? There might be in Atlanta one, in New York one, in DC one, in LA one, and then some digital ones as well. And some schools will do smaller ones. So LSAC has a calendar of all these events. So it's kind of nice because it's like one place where you can go and find all of the places where law schools are at least open, like the open places where law schools are traveling and doing these info sessions. A lot of the law schools also have info sessions on their own campus, and also they have virtual info sessions. So there's a lot of information sessions, but those forums through LSAC, again, that's the Law School Admission Council, you can go under events. You'll be able to find all the places that law schools are traveling in open forums.
Right. Okay. Well, great. We'll put a link to that information in our show notes so that people that didn't get a chance to write it down, you can always hit the show notes and get, all this information. But so let's talk about something that I talk a lot about, which is what does it cost?
Yeah.
I mean, that's another, I guess, elephant in the room of, I'm aware, but a lot of people are not aware that there's a big shift between undergrad and the way the financing works to graduate school, law school being a version of graduate school. So can you talk more about what it costs? What are we typically seeing for prices these days?
Yeah. So the sticker price for most law schools ranges from $50,000 to $90,000 a year.
And what does that include? Is that just tuition?
That would be the total cost. I think Harvard's probably around 92 or 93,000 for the total cost.
Okay.
That would be tuition. What you will see when you are looking at law schools, you're not going to see room and board, but you will see a personal allowance. And that personal allowance is to cover getting an apartment, room and board, living your life, right? Like you have to be a person. And so depending on the cost of living, like Cambridge was very expensive. My apartment was very expensive, even though I lived in university housing. So I borrowed the max of that personal amount. And then they just give it to you, and you as an adult, because you're an adult when you go to law school, you budget your money, figure out, okay, this is my rent, or I want to get a roommate, or I'm going to eat out every day, or I'm going to cook, right? Like you get to figure out how you're going to spend your personal allowance. I'm going to get my nails done all the time, whatever. And sometimes they will have a separate books fee as well. But again, they're giving you the money and you figure out what kind of books you want to get. It's definitely a shift from undergrad in which they're managing most of that, right? Mostly they're just taking tuition and then you do the rest. I think that there's a very big difference between how financial aid works on the undergrad and law school side. So most families would maybe saying, well, college is expensive, read your financial planning, we might not qualify for aid. There's a lot of need-based aid and merit-based aid for undergrad, but a lot of people feel like financial aid is not something that they would get and that sort of thing. For law schools, most law schools do not give need-based aid. Harvard, Yale only give need-based aid, so that's a caveat, right? They only give need-based aid, they do not give merit-based aid. But the majority, 95% of law schools, mostly give merit aid, with, I would say, probably 80% of law schools not giving any need-based aid, like exclusively giving merit-based aid. And that merit aid is directly correlated to your GPA and your LSAT exam. So even if you are a millionaire, super wealthy, paying cash for college, right? Your child could still get a full ride if they do very well on the LSAT and the GPA, right? There's a really great scholarship estimator, and I'll send the link. It's LSAT Demon, LSAT space Demon, has a scholarship estimator. You literally put in your GPA and LSAT. And I mean, take it with a grain of salt. It's not, 100% accurate, but it will basically break down. Okay, you're likely to get 30%. You're likely to get 50%. You're likely to get full tuition. You're likely to get more than full. There is also a level of scholarship negotiation that happens with law school admissions that doesn't really exist in the undergrad world, in which, they're kind of expecting you to negotiate your scholarship to some degree, right? If you get into a school ranked 50 and they give you $30,000 a year, and you get into a school ranked 52 and they give you $20,000 a year, you can basically say, well, hey, this school that's pretty similarly in rank to you gave me this, like, can you come up and match it, right? That is a thing that happens if you kind of are strategic in where you apply. You want to make sure that you have schools where you can get that scholarship money. You almost should never pay full sticker for law school unless you don't qualify for need-based aid and you're paying full sticker for Harvard. But for most students, there is really no reason why you should be paying full sticker for law school. You should be able to get some kind of merit money, unless you're really stretching for a school that is high on your, on the rankings list.
Right. So is that relevant as well, similar to undergrad, where the top-notch schools that have the strongest students tend to offer aid to just really the top-notch at that school? So it depends on the school if you're above average at a particular school versus across the board.
Yeah, I would say that they are going to be looking at, so law school admissions is holistic and comparative, right? So, and it's on rolling admissions, which is really important to understand. So basically with rolling admissions, it is easier to get in September than it is in February, even though the deadline might say March. It's a lie. Don't listen. There are many schools that give scholarship money out on a rolling basis. Like I've spoken to schools who have said, we literally have no money left in January. Like you could be stellar, but we've given all our money out. It doesn't matter. But so they're looking at schools are trying to raise their median LSAT scores. They're trying to raise their median GPA. They want to raise in the rankings. Rankings play a much larger role in law school admissions than they do in undergraduate admissions. And so schools are trying to get higher up in rankings. And so they are giving scholarship money out to students who will help them, have higher medians. And there are some fellowships and there are some scholarships based on public interest. They're based on being first gen, but the majority of merit-based scholarships are going because you are going to help them raise in the rankings. And they know they might take a student that says, this is a kid that's probably going to get into Georgetown.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. But if we give him a full ride, maybe he will turn down Georgetown to come, to American because we have given him full ride and his parents take the free, and there are tons of students who would take the free over going to Georgetown, for example. That helps American out. They've gotten this stellar kid with a 172, never would have usually picked American. And they were able to lure them away from the, shininess of Georgetown.
Right. So, okay. Yeah. So that's interesting that now, is there a big difference between public and private law schools as far as price or any other? You mentioned a kind of a wide range. I think you said somewhere between 60 and 90.
Yeah, I would say, public schools do tend to be priced a little bit lower. The pricing also correlates to rankings in a lot of ways, right? The lower ranked schools are generally priced less, but it's, again, like law school, there are some numbers that you can look up, right? Employment score, bar passage score, median salary. There are some law schools where the median salary is $55,000 a year and their bar passage rate's 50%. They're just not charging $90,000 a year because that would make no sense, right? And then there are some law schools where the median salary is $200,000 a year, the median salary. Okay, if that's if the median salary is $180,000 or $200,000 a year, your bar passage rate is 90%, then it's it's worth that money, right? It's all relative into what people feel like they're going to pay to get that return on investment.
Right. Okay. And then is there such thing as in-state and out-of-state rates for law school?
Yes. Some public schools do have in-state and out-of-state rates for sure.
Okay. And then obviously if you're in-state, that would typically be the lower cost. Versus, okay. So then that's again, if we're hypothetically, so a typical pattern might be the school we chose, let's say, is kind of in the middle, 75,000, and we got a kind of an in the middle scholarship. What that might be? They say 15,000, 20,000.
Yeah. But yeah, okay. 20,000 is very, very per year. So
right.
Very
so
average.
Started at 75, we got 20 off or down to 55. Then what? Where does all that money come from? Then we get federal aid.
We get loans.
What? You get loans. Okay.
Then we get loans. Yeah, it's a very exciting answer. Yeah, so most students would probably get, you have options, right? You can get a grad plus loan, a federal grad plus loan. Your parents can take out a loan. You can get sometimes loans directly from the school, or that's when you're looking at maybe Sallie Mae or Discover or all of those kind of private loans. But yeah, no, I graduated Harvard with $200 and something thousand in debt. I had a little bit from Princeton, but it was mostly from Harvard.
Right. Okay. So then you take out the loans and obviously you got to then pay them back. I guess I've seen situations where doctors that don't want to be doctors anymore and lawyers that don't want to be lawyers anymore feel trapped because of those huge loan payments that, well, I can't really change careers. I need a high paying career to cover this debt. Are you seeing that kind of thing happening as well?
I'm one of those lawyers who don't practice law anymore.
Right.
Listen, I think that schools have tried to do a lot to help with that pressure. So a lot of the top schools will have loan repayment assistance programs, which I was in when I practiced law. Actually, you don't even have to practice law to qualify. It's based on income and there are certain job qualifications. But in those loan repayment assistance programs, I think there's probably 20 really good ones in the country. They will actually, based on your income, give you a check twice a year to help you cover your loans, right? So the year that I clerked for a judge locally. Harvard sent me a check. It covered all of my loans that year. When I started practicing family law, I wasn't really rolling in it. And Harvard still covered like 90% of my loans, right? So based on your income, you pay a little bit, Harvard pays the rest. And there are a number of loan repayment assistance programs like that. The goal of those programs is to give you the freedom or the feeling that you have the freedom to choose maybe the job that you really came into law school to do. If you wanted to be a public defender, right? If you wanted to work with asylum seekers or refugees or whatever it is that you have flexibility in your career options and your loans aren't like strangling you, they are giving you those. It's different from the public service loan forgiveness program, because in the public service loan forgiveness program, first off, you have to work in public service, which as a family attorney with private divorce and custody, that does not count. So, it's a smaller subset of jobs. And you have to stay in it for 10 years, as opposed to like, I know at least Harvard's program and Yale's and Stanford, some others, there's opt in, opt out. So, I'm not in it right now, but I still have 7 years of credit if I wanted to go back and do that, right? It doesn't have to be 10 continuous. But with a lot of the public service loan forgiveness, it's 10 continuous. You have to make 120 qualifying payments, and then they will forgive the rest, which is different from your loans being on a 10-year term with the school sending you a check to help you cover your loans, right? Those are very different things. Do
the guarantees that you mentioned that Harvard or whatever school is providing and the forgiveness work together if you by chance meet all those rules where my income is low, so Harvard's giving me money to help pay, and therefore I am qualifying for 10 years of repayment because I'm paying, but I'm just using Harvard's money?
Theoretically, yes, you would qualify, but I know that at least for Harvard's LSAT program, they do put your loans on a 10-year payment. So the theory is that at that 10-year part, you will be done with your loan, so there's nothing left to forgive. Yeah. But actually, COVID has presented an interesting situation because of the way that loans were paused and that kind of thing, I think there will be some people for whom at that 10-year mark, they might still have a balance because they weren't paying during COVID, and then they can get it forgiven. So theoretically, yes, but most of those LRAP programs are going to, I think it's in your best interest, right? They're going to help you aggressively pay your loans off in 10 years because it's an aggressive payment schedule to minimize the amount of interest, right? If they're giving you a check, they would rather most of it go to, principal and not interest, so that you are debt-free ideally in those 10 years. And I will say that some programs like Harvard rolled in my undergrad debt, for which I'm very grateful. And sometimes they cover part-time work. They take into consideration if you have a child. There's different ways that they handle having a spouse. 10 years is a long time. A lot of life happens between the ages of like 25 and 40. So, there are different things there. But that if you're going to a school that doesn't have a loan repayment assistance program, and the only thing that you have is public service loan forgiveness, I mean, I don't really trust the government as much as probably I could. So you could roll those dice and hope that 10 years from now, they will actually forgive your loans. But there are a lot of people who do feel like they have to work at a corporate job. They have to get a high paying job because of the loans. They're not in a position to get things forgiven or it's just too much, right? They have other family responsibilities. So unfortunately, that is the reality, is that a lot of people do feel trapped in their legal job.
Okay. So you mentioned the government gives the loans, or you can go to the private sector. What kind of interest rates are they, like credit cards at 18%? Are they capped, or how do those work typically?
The Grad Plus loans, I believe, I think they're about 6%. They somewhere between 5 and 7, but I think they're about 6.6%. Depending on your credit and your situation, you might be able to get a lower interest rate from like Sallie Mae or Wells Fargo, but you equally could be at a higher rate. So, I know that there were a lot of people that refinanced their student loans. Of course, we had that 0% and the interest paused with the federal loans that didn't necessarily apply to your private loans. So I think that COVID has shown that sometimes there can be benefits to having most of your loans be federal, just because when they do things like pausing loans for national crises or that 0% interest rate, most of the private loan companies did not follow that. They did not care, right? But if most of your loans were held federally, then you did actually feel that relief. So I had some friends that had most of their loans privately, and it was definitely like a conversation during COVID where they were feeling more than they would have if they had taken the loans out in a private loan.
Right. Okay, let's talk a little bit about what you do then and how people can learn more about you, because obviously this is for many kind of a challenging process. And can you tell us a little bit more about your services around, I guess would be a college student that's looking to look into going on to law school? I mean, when would you like to
Absolutely.
work with them, or how do you work with them? Is it right freshman year in college? Is it senior year in college? What types of things do you help with? That type of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, we do both undergrad and grad and law school consulting. So for my like little kiddos who are in high school, maybe we're helping them find illegal internships or that sort of thing. But for the most of our law school students, I would say junior year, we have worked with students sophomore, second semester if they were really, really early. But most students are just fine in junior year, like either in the fall or the spring. We want applications to be submitted in September. So I think part of it is a conversation between you and your child about their time management skills. Because, as I mentioned, you're going to need at least 3 to 6 months to study for the LSAT exam and the essays. So we really come in with the essays. I have worked with over 200 students. 78% of our students have gotten into a top 30 law school. Over 56% of our students have gotten at least a half tuition scholarship. We're very big, like I said, on scholarships and reducing debt. And the essays are a large part of that. So we have a proprietary brainstorming method and a patent pending writing software, actually, which is pretty cool, that we use to help you brainstorm your ideas, figure out what pieces of your story authentically are going to go in which essays, really maximizing all of your optional statements, your diversity statements, even if you are like a white Anglo-Saxon male. Usually there are kind of diversities broadly defined, especially in the law school context. They're really looking for diversity of experiences. And we want to show as much as we can for law schools because so few of them interview. And so we will help you with the strategy of choosing your schools, building your list. Of course, you're writing your essays, brainstorming, helping you with scholarships and fellowships and outside scholarships as well. Because I should mention, like, you can apply to outside scholarships to law school just like you would for undergrad. And there are sometimes outside scholarships for graduate school generally, which can be used for law school. So we help you find some of those scholarships if maybe your LSAT or your GPA are not going to get you that high merit dollars. And then we help with interview prep. Should you get an interview, scholarship negotiation, which I mentioned, it's kind of a larger thing in law school. Wait lists help because wait lists move and are more active than they are in the undergrad. So writing those letters of continued interest, helping you form those relationships with admissions. So much of law school admissions is strategy and timing, and just making like smart decisions throughout the process. And so we have some private packages. We also have small group boot camps and quick start essay plans if you just want hourly essay help. But if you want comprehensive guidance, those small group boot camps or those private consulting packages are really meaningful. And then, we have unlimited email and text communication. One of the things I'm really proud of is that we have free student and alumni platforms. So we connect our high school, college, law school lawyers. We keep them connected in a platform. And so it's really great for our high school students because we're able to give them a mentor. So if they're thinking, I want to be a lawyer one day, we can give them a mentor to speak to. We give all of our first year law school students a mentor who's in the field practicing as well, so that, or just an older law school student, so that they have guidance and support as they go through. We have a job board, we have mental health and wellness resources and events, we have a directory. And so we try to do a lot. And this is something that students don't have to pay for. It's just they have it for the rest of their life. And the parents do as well, so that they feel connected and they feel like they have a place where they can ask questions. They have a community that is believing them and supporting them, because we have found that that is really related to success. And that we can help you get your first job after law school so that you could be successful and do the thing that you set out to do.
Right. And then I know you've also got some free resources, you've podcast and other. Can you tell us about some of those things?
Absolutely. So we do have a free Facebook group, Barrier Breakers Law School Edition, for all of those looking for support in law school process. We have 2 podcasts. I go live every Friday for the Break Into Law School show. It's live on YouTube, LinkedIn, and Facebook. And then it's also spun into the Break Into Law School podcast, which you can find on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google, Audible, wherever you get your podcasts. We also have a podcast, Mindful Prayers for Students. I'm Christian, although our students are of every faith and of no faith, but we do, believe in infusing mindfulness and calming techniques into the process. And so the prayer podcast is there if you want. I should mention I have a team. I also work with I have other associate law school consultants who are former assistant directors of law school at large schools. We even have a former admissions officer from Harvard Law School on our team as well. We have free guides. We have like a 50-something page essential guide, like how to apply to law school, which you can download on our website. We have a guide to brainstorming your personal statement, your diversity statement. We try to put out as much free content as possible, and we have a very active YouTube channel where we're posting 1 to 2 videos a week.
Wow. It sounds like you keep busy.
I do stay busy.
All right. So, and all that stuff is accessible at your main website, which would be what?
Yes. So if you go to smontgomeryconsulting.com, S for Sydney. So smontgomeryconsulting.com, you just click on law school. You'll be able to see all of those resources. You can even go to breakintolawschool.com. That is the name of our podcast, Break Into Law School. We actually have a free 2-day conference next month, June 25th through 26th. You can register for that conference right on that Break Into Law School website. We're going to have sessions on how to apply to law school, financing your legal education, equity and law school admissions, but also like becoming a law professor, climbing the corporate ladder, getting on the bench so that you can see different legal paths. So that's a free conference. And that goes with the podcast, Break Into Law School.
Right. Is that conference going to happen again in the future?
Yes, it's an annual conference.
Annual conference. Okay.
And so that's June 25th through 26th. It's completely free. So, we have some good sponsors. We're really proud of that.
Unfortunately, this podcast won't be live before that date. It's probably not going to go live till June or July.
They can watch the replays.
Oh, okay. Great.
Yeah, we'll have it available so you can watch the replays as well.
So it's a virtual conference?
It's a virtual conference.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, then there you go. You can get out there and watch the live.
And I would also say that people can also submit questions to bit.ly/break into law school. We answer any and every question live on our podcast about law school admissions. So if you just have questions and you want to ask me, I will answer them for you.
Right. So yeah, again, it sounds like you're putting a lot of stuff out there free. You've got a lot of consultants and help, and of course, you've given us a lot of great information here for the last almost an hour now. So I really do appreciate it. And we will stay in touch. Thanks for spending time with us.
Of course. Thanks. I'll just mention one more thing. Definitely follow us at S Montgomery Consulting on Instagram and TikTok if you haven't already.
Okay. Sounds good.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right. That was a great interview. I know I learned a ton. If you want to look up Sydney and learn more about her, all the information is available in the show notes at tamingthehighcostofcollege.com. We appreciate you listening. If you're enjoying what you're hearing, we'd appreciate a review wherever you get your podcasts, especially if you can go to iTunes or Spotify and leave us a review. That helps us get found by other parents that are looking to help with their kids with college. That's all we have for today. I appreciate you listening. We'll see you next week.
Thank you for listening to the Taming the High Cost of College podcast. Now it's time for you to take action. Head to tamingthehighcostofcollege.com for show notes, bonus content, and to leave feedback for Brad. The next step on your college journey starts now.
Brad Baldridge is a registered representative of Cambridge Investment Research and an investment advisor representative of Cambridge Investment Research Advisors, a registered investment advisor. Securities are offered through Cambridge Investment Research Incorporated, a broker-dealer and member of FINRA and SIPC. Brad owns 2 companies, Baldridge Wealth Management and Baldridge College Solutions. The Baldridge companies are not affiliated with Cambridge Investment Research.